Welcome to Tech Garage, presented by rockauto.com. Well, we're going plumb crazy today here in the shop, and Brian's already at it. He's taking the wheels off because we're going to do a brake upgrade. Now, this is a Hemi RT shaker. It's a 5.7 liter. It's not a Hellcat, it's not a Demon, but it still produces a lot of horsepower. And when it produces a lot of horsepower, you're going to need the stopping power. And fortunately, rockauto.com has just that. They have packages here, which is really cool because I can put everything together in one package. This is a Z26 upgrade brake package by Power Stop, and it all starts right here at the pads. You can see the fiber ceramic pads right here, which is going to be dust free, and on the back you got the stainless steel shims. Comes with all the hardware you need. Once again, a package. Even comes with both calipers, the rear caliper right here and the front caliper. The two piston calipers, all new slides. These are powder coated high temperature calipers, which really going to give us some good stopping power. Now the real beauty lies right here in these rotors. These rotors are actually zinc coated for rust, and they're really nice because they're drilled and slotted. The drill is going to help with some heat dissipation, and the slots is going to allow those pads to gas and get it out of there and get the friction material on there for a high coefficient of friction, man. Awesome package here by rockauto.com. But we need to get it on the car, so let's check in with Brian.
Okay, so this is the bottom caliper mounting bracket bolt. I got to get the top one out. I've already got the caliper bolts out, and you can tell by looking at this factory Dodge brake package, it's pretty beefy, but certainly in need of some love and service. There's damage, there's corrosion and heat damage to the rotor. The pads are shot, which precipitated this whole job. We're going to take the opportunity and upgrade that system to the Power Stop setup we've got. So I'm going to get this caliper up off, then the bracket. And for the caliper, we're going to hang it on the bungee cord, one of our fancier tools here in Tech Garage. And we're going to save that as the last step in the project so we lose the least amount of brake fluid. We'll do that all the way around. We'll still have to re-bleed, but we're going to lose the least amount of fluid. So let me get this all buttoned up. It's going to be a fun project. And what you've got to remember is just because it's got pretty paint does not mean it's got performance.
Brian's absolutely right. Pretty paint don't equal performance. So what does? Well, we have to look at a couple of basic brake terms, and one of them's coefficient of friction and brake dynamics. Now, brake dynamics, that's pretty easy. I got my little model here. You're going down the road, you slam on the brakes, guess what? The weight keeps transferring forward. Most of the braking is going to be done in the front, hence our two calipers here from Power Stop. You see the two pistons in the front right there versus the one in the rear, so we're going to focus there. Also, that coefficient of friction. Well, that's a big word. What is it? Well, we want a high coefficient of friction. I can demonstrate it right here. Sandpaper, as I start pushing it across the table, it's hard to push across the table. That's a high coefficient of friction versus the ice cube. It slides right across. That's not a very good coefficient of friction. Matter of fact, it's very low, and that's not going to do any stopping power. So we want a high coefficient of friction. Well, you can see right here, this is going to be a low coefficient of friction. I got this pad right here that's totally worn out, brought this into Tech Garage. Now this is metal to metal, and when I'm going around there, I have a low coefficient of friction, but even more importantly, I'm not dissipating any heat. These rotors are big heat sinks as well. So when I'm going down the road, I'm not dissipating that heat. You're boiling back up into the brake fluid, you're getting brake fade, boom, it's going, you get air in the system, pedal goes to the floor, it's not a good thing. So like I said, the meat and potatoes are right here, man. We're talking about the drilled and the slotted rotors. Well, what's going on here? Well, the drilled gives us some more surface area to dissipate the heat. You can see the ventilation area right here and the thickness of the rotor. It's used as a big heat sink. Man, this one here, super high coefficient of friction. It's going to do the stopping no problem. Brian's got it underway.
All right, I'm gently just working this caliper up off here. You may have to battle it a little bit. This one's nice and loose. And this paint job, you never know what you're going to find. What is that? Masking tape, it appears, from the paint job on the caliper. They did a stellar job painting, but the masking, well, leaves a little bit to be desired. It is amazing to me that it hasn't burnt off under hard braking. This guy's got to drive faster. Wow. Well, more evidence that we got to do a full-blown brake job here. Hang the caliper up out of the way. Got to try to protect that brake line in the process. Let me get ours over here and secured. And that'll allow me to finish the removal of, let's look at these pads. I'm real curious about this now. So let me work these out. Hard to tell what you're going to find, something like this. Something that's a little did you know. Number one, take a lug nut, put it back on here so you're not wrestling the rotor the whole time like I just was. And when you think about the thermal dynamics of brakes, man, did you know on a 4,000-pound car like this, It takes the same brake horsepower to get it from 65 down to 60 miles an hour as it would from 35 to 0. These things do a really big job. So I feel good about the upgrade that we're going to bolt on. But I want you to see this pad and see what we're really dealing with here. Okay. Well, there's the tape from the paint job on the caliper. Fascinating. Land of opportunity. This car's going to stop a lot better. All right, I'll finish this up. We'll get the rotor off. We're going to clean up that hub face, make sure it's in great shape to receive the new rotor. Remember, calipers last. Well, as promised, we've got this pretty well cleaned up with most of the rust and oxidation now gone, creating a really nice marriage and surface area between the new rotor and that assembly. That's important to get maximum braking power. Now, I promised you we'd compare the thickness here between the new rotor and the old rotor. The old one was about 1 1/8 thick with the mic. The new one, a little over 1 1/4. Now, those are rough numbers, but it helps you understand there's a lot more beef here. We already talked about the slotted rotor here. We already talked about the cross-drilled rotor. We're making a ton of power. We've got to be able to shed a ton of heat, and that's exactly what this is going to give us. The nice thing about the Power Stop kit that rockauto.com sent us is it comes pre-assembled. The slide pins already lubed for us. We've got everything together, and we've got the new pads already in with the proper lubricant. Here's a look at the new Extreme pad from Power Stop, and there's the old pads. Think we needed a brake job? We're certainly going to be able to stop this thing much better. So my next step is to get the rotor on here. Don't forget, put a lug nut on. Give yourself every possible chance to succeed here. Hold that in place. There we go. All right, now this whole assembly can go up and on. Now here's a little tip. John won't let us do anything in the shop related to brakes on the brackets without the appropriate thread lock. So we've got that just for the caliper mounting bracket. Nothing else. We're going to get this assembly on. Upside down, Brian. There you go. And I'll get these in and, of course, torqued down. And the final step, don't forget, is to transfer the brake line. We're going to do that last so we lose the least possible amount of fluid as we talked about. Now, so far, this is pretty traditional plug-and-play brake job, but there's actually a lot you need to consider when you're doing a total brake system upgrade like we are.
Well, it's been traditional up to this point, Brian says, and you know what? It still is. How do I know that? Well, I'm looking at the caliper, and the caliper actually doesn't have a mechanical e-brake built into it. It's just a normal caliper. That tells me we can push it back, but there is something I want to show you. Check this out right here. This is pretty cool. So if I pull off the rotor, you can see the little shoes inside of here. Now these shoes, that's what the emergency brake is. Inside of that rotor, there's a little surface, and inside of it, it actually touches that surface right there, and that's what does the e-brake. So we don't have a lot of precautions here as far as switching the caliper out. It's going to be pretty cut and dry, almost the same procedure as Brian. But you may run into a car that has a mechanical e-brake built into the caliper assembly. You want to throw up a red flag, you want to slow down. And here's what's going on here. If you look at this caliper, it's actually got the little tabs right here, the little tangs, and those little tangs tell me that this caliper has to be pushed back and turned at the same time or will do damage. So I went to Rock Auto, I got tangs here and the tool to do it with, to push it on rockauto.com, put it in there, line it up, make sure they're in there, and then you can push a little bit of pressure, and at the same time I'll take a wrench and I'll turn this at the same time. So I'm turning, pushing, turning, pushing. I'm not going to do any damage to that caliper assembly, and that's hugely important when you're dealing with that. Now you may have a caliper that's electronic. That's even bigger because you're going to have some procedure inside the car that has to go through and actually walk the piston back in order to take it off and make sure it's safe to disengage it. Electronic calipers are out there today as well. Well, ours are pretty cut and dry. I took Brian's advice. I went ahead and cleaned up the hub real good. It looks phenomenal. Now all I really have to do is just take our rotor, and they're labeled rear, driver side, because they're directional with the slots here and the drill pattern, and then the caliper assembly. I can take it. Once again, lock tight on the bolts for the bracket, make sure nothing's going to come loose, and get my caliper assembly, slip it over it. Once I slip it over it, I can reach around here and put this on and go ahead and attach the bolts. Make sure it's secure. Let me get it lined up. Oh, my pad popped out. Just be patient. Once again, you got to make sure the pads are all in order. Everything's lined up. There it goes. I got it good. Now I can slip it on there. If it doesn't feel like it's going right, stop. Don't keep forcing it. It's probably not going right, and there's probably something wrong. So you want to go through and fix the process before it's too late, and you do some damage to it, okay? And Brian mentioned the torque specifications. That's huge. You want to make sure you put the proper torque specifications, especially on these caliper bracket bolts, because they have a lot of torque to put onto them here. Line it up back here, get it threaded in. That'll hold it in place for now. I'll come back and I'll secure it. Now it's important that I switch the lines, and when you do that, you have to bleed it. There's a couple ways to bleed it. You can either pressure bleed it, you can vacuum bleed it, which we're going to do, or you can get in there and manually bleed it. Pump, 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 pump. Now, hugely important. Look at this last graphic. It's so important that you actually take the break-in process and you go down the road. What do? Well, just read it, please, the instructions. Don't stop, slam on, and wait, because you're going to cook it and you're going to create a pedal pulsation. You just want to stop with some aggressive stops and keep driving so the system gets cool. Well, I'm going to finish up this, but you can look at Brian's up front. It looks great. It's all together, torque to specifications. It's going to do some great stopping. You know what? We got Garage Ed right after this segment. We're going to do some starter diagnosing. So we're just getting started here. Stick around. There's plenty more Tech Garage presented by rockauto.com.